I think what I learned is that in business, you learn to listen and to take in people's pain points, right? Because as a person who's trying to be a capitalist and function in society, your business is only going to do as well as you mirror the people that are coming into your business, right? And how it is that you serve them. And politics was like that for me because I was such a people person that I took that in there. On the reverse side, the lessons that I learned from politics is that you can be on top of the world one day and the very next day you're at the bottom. And if you are like me and you're not able to stay quiet in the face of absolute disastrous government, even when it's your own, you're going to fall really quickly. And I did. But what I learned in that process is that I retained my integrity and my honesty and my authenticity. I don't think I would, I know for a fact I wasn't willing to damage that or give that up. That's everything at the end of the day. So that's what sports does. You're part of something that is bigger than you. Even though you're not playing the sport, you feel it in your gut. You feel every piece of what that person is going through. That is magic. How do you take that and translate that into business and take that and help those athletes that define hero, for so many of us globally, no matter what the sport is? And what they realized is that there was this ability to look at a person's genomics, to be able to look at their muscles and how it worked. And like, say for you and I, Tim, at our ages, we're going to go for the Olympics. Well, the average program is going to look at some of our differentiations, but it's not going to get really into the core of what makes you and I different. We're only separated by a teeny percentage actually in our DNA, but the variance in our DNA would make it so that you and I should not be doing the same workout. We should not be eating the same food. We will have different patterns just based on our gender, all of these kinds of things. And how do you take that to the next level so that the athlete is actually able to take that information and on the worst day possible have the best performance of their lives, right? And we have a speed skater who's our brand ambassador. His name is Hayden Mayeur. Hayden was a silver medalist speed skater when he met Dr. Kapoor. This was before I was there. And they were looking at him because he was devastated. He had lost the gold medal by a 1/10 of a second. In sports, you're not measuring by days, weeks, months, even minutes. You're measuring by milliseconds and, portions of a second, right? So how do you do that? So they did his DNA, they did all this neat stuff, but what he'll tell you is that it was the microbiome figuring out what he was eating. A lot of athletes carb-load, right, before they do their performance. And seems to have been sort of the norm, but Hayden did protein. And when we figured that out, he was able to get the gold medal. He literally is the gold medalist twice over now for speed skating and the Canadian World Championships. Wow. Yes, he had to up his protein in his diet, particularly increase his protein and take a look at how his body was interpreting carbohydrates, because how your protein absorbs and metabolizes is going to translate directly into energy one way or the other. And for some people, they need those short bursts of energy that come from carbohydrates, but others need like long-term energy releases, right? And it just depends on the sport, it depends on the person, but these are all the kinds of things that a lot of sports teams, a lot of people are looking into, but now we have the way to really take that data to the next level.
Hello, and welcome to the Alloutcoach podcast. My name is Tim Mikhailishvili. I'm your host, also CEO and co-founder of Amadeus Pharma, a health tech impact startup that specializes in performance analytics, where we go beyond analogies to integrate the elements of sports and data science into the daily fabric of all operations to grow performance and efficiency in life science companies. Today, I am with Honorable Leela Aheer, who's a Canadian politician, former minister, an activist, and an advocate for the community, from which she's very well known, as well as for increased inclusivity. She's an expert in optimizing athletic performance in innovative ways. Chief Growth Officer at the BioSport. And so you can imagine why it was such an honor to meet her and to invite her to be a guest on this show, where she will talk about the intersection between sports and science and healthcare, and also leadership and the implications on the culture of actually bringing these elements together. So, Leela, it's truly a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the Alloutcoach show.
Oh, thanks, Tim. It's a real pleasure to be here with you too. Thank you for having me.
you're the first politician that I have on the show after 6 seasons. So I have to start there. I have to ask you, what got you interested in politics in the province of Alberta, Canada? Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In all honesty, I think that politics found me. I am an entrepreneur and I'm a musician, and so I worked a lot in my community, volunteered. I think I was just very, very much grassroots person in my community, and I've been in my community since I was in grade 3. So you get to know everybody, and I was probably the first person of color out in my community as well too. And it was very, very interesting having that intersection of being in a small rural town. I've lived in my community since I was in grade 3. I've always been working. My parents had this amazing connection into the community. And so if you wanted to have a job in my little rural community, you had to work on farms or babysit, right? That was really the only way to get around. And to be able to work, because at that time it was considered really far out of the city, right? So I knew everybody in the community, and I became a music teacher out here and taught what seems like 100 years out in our community. And politics really found me. I mean, I'd always been working in the background ever since I was little. I was door knocking for heart and stroke or diabetes or something like that. So I was a really good little door knocker since I was probably about 12 or 13 for all of that. Or if, you're selling chocolates for your local, band concert or whatever. It was always at people's doors. They always knew who I was. And you had to walk miles. It wasn't close by. It wasn't neighborhoods. You're walking, acreages and all of that. So when there was a change that was happening in our province politically, and they came and found me, and they actually they came after me for a couple of months. I wasn't sure if you always feel like you have imposter syndrome, when people ask you to do that kind of thing. And so it took me a little while to get my head around it, but I realized at that point that if I wanted to participate, I was being given this amazing opportunity to participate. And so I said yes. And I only won my first election by 260 votes.
Oh, wow. And when was this? So you were recruited into politics, right? In some ways. And that was during after college, or at what point?
Oh yeah, no, I was well into my life. I had 2 children, 14 and 16. Yeah, no, it wasn't early on in my life. I was 46, I think, at the time, 45. Yeah. And I had a well-established business. I'm an entrepreneur. My husband and I also have several businesses together. So it was really, I didn't need the job, as it were, the quote unquote job. I just wanted to, this country has given me and my family so much. I mean, everybody in this country is a family of immigrants to some point or another, unless you're, Indigenous peoples. So I just felt compelled to be able to give back to the community that had given me so much. And it was because it was a difficult situation, because the man who was presently elected at that time, he had crossed the floor in politics, and he had crossed from one party to the other, and it really threw everybody for a loop. And it was quite an interesting time. And the election was called too early, 2 years before election time. So it was only 2 years into their mandate when they called the election. And he was a very dear friend of mine. In fact, I taught his children. So it was a really big decision, because the community really divided, right? Because we helped this fellow with his initial election, like a lot. Like we were door knocking for him. We helped him. We worked really, really hard on his campaign. So running against him was really hard. But I mean, it was character. And I mean, I was still friends and everything afterwards. Not everybody felt the same way about me, but that's just the way it is. And I could have just as easily lost. So.
Wow. Yeah. And your responsibilities in that role were the Department of Culture and Multiculturalism, correct? And
in opposition, actually, I had several portfolios over the time. I was actually the energy and shadow minister. So that means the opposition minister. I also had education. And then I had child and youth advocate and children's services and status of women and multicultural, or not multiculturalism yet. That came more when I went into government and I became a minister.
I see. Wow. And did you continue your entrepreneurial ventures while you were a politician?
To some degree. I mean, you really need to focus on the work, because especially when you're in opposition, you don't have all of the benefit of government and research. So all of the debate and everything that you do is really, really like self-researched, along with your little mini staff that you have in opposition. So it was such a fire hose. I really had to focus on that. But because I'm a musician, I was still, I mean, I had gigs that I had planned up into that year. So I had to actually play that year. I just had to be careful that it wasn't a conflict of interest. So any paid gigs that I'd had for that year, I actually volunteered for them, just to make sure that there wasn't any sort of, weird conflict between party politics, and you know how it is. Everything can be messaged a certain way if they wanted to. But I actually had really great relationships with the government of the time, and we worked very, very valuably across the party lines. In fact, I passed a really important piece of legislation on adoption collaboratively with the government at that time. So it's and that's the way it's supposed to work. Of course, you would not think that based on politics these days. But opposition, like democratic governments, are based on having strong oppositions and being able to poke holes into legislation, and to have a lens so that your legislation is not just purely ideological. So it was a really huge learning experience. Very humbling.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in politics, and I'm completely an apolitical person. However, I do want to ask what those key lessons were from your career as a politician, and how you applied them into business.
I think actually it was the other way around, Tim. I think I applied business philosophy to politics.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm a very fiscal person. I mean, when you run a business, you have to know budgets, you have to know numbers, you have to know capacity, you have to know messaging. As a musician, you're very tied into the community. So everything that comes out of your mouth has meaning, and you need to draw people in and bring them into your heart. And I also conducted 5 choirs. So the way I looked at it was like conducting, it's like a beautiful mess of chaos, because you've got all of these personalities and everybody coming together, and you have to be able to bring everybody into a beautiful sound. And you've got everybody from one side of the spectrum, left and right, whatever, everybody in your riding isn't necessarily following your principles or your ideologies. So I think what I learned is that in business, you learn to listen and to take in people's pain points, right? Because as a person who's trying to be a capitalist and function in society, your business is only going to do as well as you mirror the people that are coming into your business, right? And how it is that you serve them. And politics was like that for me, because I was such a people person that I took that in there. On the reverse side, the lessons that I learned from politics is that you can be on top of the world one day, and the very next day you're at the bottom. And if you are like me and you're not able to stay quiet in the face of absolute disastrous government, even when it's your own, you're going to fall really quickly. And I did. But what I learned in that process is that I retained my integrity and my honesty and my authenticity. I don't think I would, I know for a fact I wasn't willing to damage that or give that up. That's everything at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. I mean, when I read your profile, in terms of understanding how versatile your experience has been, how diverse, this is something that I'm always inspired by. People like Benjamin Franklin, historical figures, who had so many different talents. And I, from my perspective, usually a person who steps into many different roles has a very particular appreciation and love of life and curiosity, scientific curiosity, where they want to be experts in many different things, and they want to dedicate themselves and have a legacy. And who were some of your mentors as well, people that you looked up to throughout your career?
Yeah, I know it sounds goofy, but so all of the women in my family on my dad's side were all educators and very, very strong women in their communities in India. And they really had been raised. So my father's father was a circuit judge in South India. So what that means is that they only stay in a community for a certain amount of time, and they move around in order to stay impartial, right? So if you look at, you're an analytics guy, right? So if you look at the process of being impartial, right, in like you have to spread yourself around. And so the kids were all raised all over South India at different places. They were, they moved all the time. And so there's 11 of them, and they were a very, very close knit family. And my grandfather on my dad's side just promoted the heck out of the strength of educating his daughters in India. And so I was given that strength through my uncles and my aunties in India. And I visited them. So when I went to India in 1988, I stayed for 10 months and spent time with my family and learned everything that I could get my hands on. Back in those days, you had to be taking courses in order to extend your student visa. So in order for my visa to get extended, I took lessons in instruments from India, singing, all sorts of anything you can imagine. I was taking.
That was going to be my question also.
Yeah.
What music? You mentioned you're a conductor, but you sing. What other instruments?
Yeah, my instrument is mostly my voice, but I play guitar and piano too. And we play all sorts of music. Where Stampede is coming up here in Alberta, which is a country music time. So normally would have been a very busy time for me practicing to play, because they hire people all over the place to go and play at this time of year. It's really, really quite lovely. You'll have to come out sometime for Stampede. But so anyways, I ended up studying a couple of philosophers in India, obviously Gandhi, and I don't mean to use that lightly, because the philosophy was one piece of it, but I had family on both sides of the interpretation of what Gandhi did for India. One was freedom fighter, the other is he stopped industrialization in India, and there's two very prominent perspectives, and I'm probably not even covering it. I'm not being nearly nuanced enough. But while the Western world sees Gandhi as this peacemaker, and all, which of course was my philosophy too, and he had so many things that he said, especially around the protection of things that were weaker than you. So I became a very strict vegetarian while I was in India, and it really, really impacted my life. The other person is Vivekananda and Ambedkar. So Ambedkar was considered the father of freedom in India and the Constitution. I'm just trying to remember if I'm remembering that correctly. But so Ambedkar was the important things about him is that he tried to remove the caste system in India. And so I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's like a system, a strategy, of like status, right, in India. Yes. So Dr. Ambedkar, along with Vivekananda and other philosophers at the time, looked at how they could remove the system. And because when the British came in, that colonial system really, really impacted the way that the caste system had been working. Not that it was working great before, but what ended up happening is that they wanted to release people from these caste systems. Like I'll give you a really an interesting example. Is that like, for example, and I know this is going to sound really weird, but I don't know if you've seen the clothing that we wear that's like that wrapped fabric. It's called a sari. It has like a small blouse underneath it. Did you know that in India there was something called a breast tax? So women of low caste were not allowed to wear a fabric to cover their breasts, and in order to cover their breasts, they had to pay a tax to get a piece of fabric to be able to cover their breasts. So it was things like that in the inequalities that was happening in the country. So Dr. Ambedkar was what they call as low caste and untouchable, as it were. So he fell outside of the premise of that. And, he was a transformative leader because he had been discriminated against. And so if you look at the kinds of things that he did, he went to university in the London School of Economics. He had a legal and political career. He literally fought against everything that you could possibly imagine that a person of low caste would not be able to do, because it's just, they're not allowed to. He was a justice minister. And then he drafted the initial, like, they consider him the father of the Indian Constitution. So those two men, plus the women in my life who were educators at that time, had such a tremendous impact, like, for large people. And then my neighbor, Maria Driuso, who lived across the street from me, this sweet Italian woman, she was like my second mom. And she was the other one who really, really influenced. She was the kindest person I ever met, like just literally, and raised me like her daughter. Her son was my best friend. And again, she just, I don't know, she brought out that desire to be like and I don't call myself a champion by any stretch of the imagination, so please don't take that in that context. But she was a champion within her own space of that social justice of bringing, like, she was such a strong woman in such a small little community. And, she affirmed all of the things that I cared about and thought about when I was younger. So I would have to say those are probably the most important people.
Yeah. Well, Mahatma Gandhi's quote came to mind, that if you live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever.
Mhm.
There's such a big emphasis on learning, right, and education.
Lifelong learning. Yes,
Yeah.
lifelong learning. He
Yeah.
always talked about that. And he also felt that everybody there's no job below you. And that really influenced me as a young person too. It didn't matter whether I was mucking out stalls, which you're literally up to your knees in horse poop and cow poop, right? All the way to sitting in a top position in a cabinet in government. It just goes to show you in our countries that anything is possible. Like if a girl like me, who comes from very, very humble beginnings, has the capacity to be able to then be creating law and legislation, like that, anything is, if I can do it, anybody can.
Yeah. And you know what? What's unique also about your story is that you took your integrity, your authenticity, and you gave that voice with that responsibility that you had in politics. And I'm really hopeful that more people have those same motivations and that kind of character that are in politics in this entire world, not just in Canada or United States, but everywhere. But let's switch gears a little bit about the other curiosity that I have, and that is you've learned a lot probably from dealing with sports athletes, some of the top sports athletes over 30 years now, many years, right, and optimizing their performance. How did that start? And tell us your journey to the BioSport and what you're focusing now on.
So it's interesting, like such a good question. Like I find, I don't know if you found this with your life, Tim, but the doors just, I don't know, the energy, the universe kind of drives you in the right direction, right? I was actually going to run for federal politics, and the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, they actually denied my application to run. And it was a real, I would be lying. Like I was just so flabbergasted that I wasn't even being given an opportunity. It's just so anti-democratic, right? And it's not just the Conservative Party. This happens throughout, party politics. And but I was just really, the wind sort of got knocked out of me and for me, 10 seconds of having the wind knocked out of me is a really long time in Leela land, right? Because you're just resilient and just keep pushing on. Like whenever something closes, something else opens. For a better word. Well,
true entrepreneur. That's been your kind of motto, right?
It's like, okay, well, if they don't want me, I'm gonna figure something else out to do, right? And so,
also, of course, athletic mindset. So you must have an athletic mindset. I don't know if you have a background in sports, but as well.
I have always one tick notion of sports. I see athletes as heroes, whether they're the runner that lives beside you or your favorite football person, right? I love like American football and soccer. Like I love it. I love it. And my sons were both very, very involved in sports and music when they were younger. So, you're the team treasurer and all the things. But am I athletic? No, I'm very, very healthy and I work out a lot, but no, I wouldn't consider myself an athlete. But the mindset is definitely that, because if you look at a team like the Oilers just lost, right? For us in Canada, that's a big deal. But they're not going to like
NHL hockey for those
NHL hockey. Yeah. So they're not going to just quit and not be the Oilers. This was their first time at the Stanley Cup in how many years? They're not going to they might be sad for a couple of days, but they're going to pick up their bootstraps and they're going to fight again next year to try and get that title. And to me, that kind of resilience is what drives anybody who's successful, because the minute that thing happened, I did a video and I apologized to everybody who'd bought memberships, because I'd been working on that nomination for 18 months and I'd sold 1,300 memberships. So it had been a lot of work. And then oddly enough, Dr. Kapoor, who is the founder and CEO of BioAero, which is the mothership for where the BioSport comes from in our company, he had been working on a platform, an AI LLM method to be able to collate large data sets. So he invited me as an MLA to come and visit this. He was at a program that we have called in Alberta called Inventures, and it's small, startups and organizations like this to pitch the work that they're doing. Things. He's a cardiologist. It's amazing to know, and you just know you're in the right space. Anyways, I said to him at BioAero at that time for Phenomic, I was so interested. And so I said, let me show you what I'm capable of. I'm very, I'm a strategic person, and I come in with a lot of ideas in a very, very different lens. And because I had connections through politics, it just seemed like a marriage made in heaven. So anyways, I jumped in. I'm a year in now. So unlike you, Tim, I don't have a lot of background in this. But because I love plasticity. Like I love forcing my brain into places. And when you're a politician, the other thing I learned from politics is that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you do have to listen, and you have to be able to absorb that information and then translate that either in front of the media or be able, especially during COVID, I was a minister in COVID. So trying to translate those messages was just absolutely horrible for the people who had to listen to me and for myself as well too. But you become a very good reader of the room. And this was just the perfect timing of the intersection of science, and not that other people haven't been doing science and sports for 100 years, they have, but the way that we can put data together and how we look at DNA and the intersection of that, and then microbiome and the gut, the gut head connection at the vagus nerve and the impact that that has on an athlete and the capacity that we have to be able to help athletes. They're superhumans already. So why are these superhumans? Why are some able to do, like if you and I, let's decided you and I wanted to go to be Olympic athletes tomorrow as weightlifters at our ages.
Let's dream a little bit. That's been my dream. I'm taking my children next year to the Olympics.
There you go.
Experience something that I never did.
Exactly. And watching it is just, it's just, you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, right?
Okay.
And that's what sports does. You're part of something that is bigger than you. Even though you're not playing the sport, you feel it in your gut. You feel every piece of what that person is going through. That is magic. How do you take that and translate that into business and take that and help those athletes that define hero, for so many of us globally, no matter what the sport is? And what they realized is that there was this ability to look at a person's genomics, to be able to look at their muscles and how it worked. And like, say for you and I, Tim, at our ages, we're going to go for the Olympics. Well, the average program is going to look at some of our differentiations, but it's not going to get really into the core of what makes you and I different. We're only separated by a teeny percentage actually in our DNA, but the variance in our DNA would make it so that you and I should not be doing the same workout. We should not be eating the same food. We will have different patterns just based on our gender, all of these kinds of things. And how do you take that to the next level so that the athlete is actually able to take that information and on the worst day possible have the best performance of their lives, right? How do we help them do that? So that's sort of the guts behind it. And we have a speed skater who's our brand ambassador. His name is Hayden Mayeur. Hayden was a silver medalist speed skater when he met Dr. Kapoor. This was before I was there. And they were looking at him because he was devastated. He had lost the gold medal by 1/10 of a second. In sports, you're not measuring by days, weeks, months, even minutes. You're measuring by milliseconds and, portions of a second, right? So how do you do that? So they did his DNA, they did all this neat stuff, but what he'll tell you is that it was the microbiome figuring out what he was eating. A lot of athletes carb-load right before they do their performance. And it seems to have been sort of the norm, but Hayden did protein. And when we figured that out, he was able to get the gold medal. He literally is the gold medalist twice over now for speed skating and the Canadian World Champions. Wow. So yes, he had to up his protein in his diet, particularly increase his protein and take a look at how his body was interpreting carbohydrates, because how your protein absorbs and metabolizes is going to translate directly into energy one way or the other. And for some people, they need those short bursts of energy that come from carbohydrates, but others need like long-term energy releases, right? And it just depends on the sport, it depends on the person, but these are all the kinds of things that a lot of sports teams, a lot of people are looking into, but now we have the way to really take that data to the next level in a meaningful way. And like when you do like advanced DNA testing, like whole genome sequencing and all that, and you couple that with insights into the athlete, like you're optimizing training, you are optimizing nutrition. What about recovery, right? Recovery is a huge part of that, but also stopping an athlete from having a career-ending injury because they happen to be doing a set of exercises that might not best maximize their capacity. Let's say you and I aren't supposed to be weightlifters. You're supposed to, I don't know, play volleyball, and I'm supposed to be a hockey player, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't do weightlifting or even attempt at the Olympics. 40% of it is pure determination and goals and motivation, right? So it's not to say you shouldn't be a weightlifter, but because your body is more adept to, doing a different sport, then how do we optimize what your body can do in the sport of your choice to make sure you don't have a career-ending injury, right? And so that multi-omic profiling, like looking at your proteomics, right? How your drug interactions, your supplement interactions, your transcriptomics, how that is leveraged in your system. That multi-omic data is absolutely integral to the longevity of anybody, but especially an athlete. So we tailor that to the person.
Okay, wonderful. And so you work with players and athletes across different sports, correct?
Yes. So right now we're sequencing 100 athletes as part of our the work that we're doing right now in the BioSport. So we're doing a capital raise right now for the first chunk of our company. So that we thought, the best way to be able to manifest the best data is to have great people as a baseline and to see optimum athletes at their peak, how they're doing and how do we leverage that. So these athletes, we're going to support them through the entire process. And then in turn, that information will help us build really strong apps that look into the details of your life. Like the questionnaire is not a small questionnaire, Tim. And then the questionnaire will also trigger more questions. So say, for example, if you have trouble sleeping and we go through the process of what's happening in your sleep, we check your DNA to see how your supplements are absorbing and your microbiome, all of these kinds of things. Well, then we're going to have to figure out what works in your system, right? So what's happening is that it's ending a lot of the guesswork in being able to figure out what people need. And I think in injury prevention, that's probably one of the most profound things that can happen, because if we look at your predispositions to injury, right, and you're flagged, and your rest periods, your hydration, stretching, personalized, methodologies are going to make a humongous difference. And again, it's not like we're the first people doing this. All of these coaches, and they're doing amazing work, but we can actually provide the science behind it now to be able to, it's a proof point, right? And probably even could help more to these amazing coaches and doctors. And, they have lifestyle coaches, they have mental health coaches. The other thing that's really interesting is that your food impacts your brain and how it thinks and your mental health and addiction. And that now in the epigenetics side of things, right? So in your environmental side, we're starting to be able to see how bodies and minds are coping, and what it is that we can do in the side of prevention and precision medicine to help with that coping mechanism. It may be food related, it may be supplement related, it may be exercise related. There's so many things. So and it's ongoing monitoring and feedback will help to feed the app and the large language models to learn about you. So along with the human, you have the AI model as well too, that just scoops up all of that information and makes a very meaningful report.
Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, the margins, the winning margins in sports are usually, decimals, right, or thousands of a second.
Razor
thin, right? And you may have the best genes, and you may be a leader, cut out for your sport, but you need that environment. You need those, you need to understand how to take advantage of all the different analytics tools and capabilities that are out there today, in order to make sure that you edge out that that silver that your competitor, right? So that's so it's great that you're ahead of the game and you're differentiating your your product as well. What stage is it? Is it at a proof of concept right now? Is it at a concept stage?
We're minimum viable at right now, MVA. Our pre-seed was supplied by Kapoor Wealth in our initial stages, and now we're into pre-revenue. So there's tremendous opportunities. We have zero debt in the company, so there's opportunities for equity, or there's opportunities for convertible debenture, depending on the investments. And that's one piece of it, but there's also, it's a SaaS model, right? So the opportunity for people to really, really get engaged and involved. And, we're looking at anybody who engages in wellness optimization, coaches, teams, people who are seeking data-driven, individualized performance, plans. And it stands out because we're using not just the full genome sequencing, but we're really, really looking into those deeper insights, right? And you can refine the data once you understand the biomarkers.
Well, I'm very excited to hear more. I would love to invite you to the Medical Innovation Olympics that are taking place in October, by the way. Yes, this is
thank you so much.
So I think I have a feeling that we're going to hear more about it there. Yes, we have a Medical Innovation Olympics series of here at the Alloutcoach podcast as well. This podcast is dedicated to inspiring people to transcend their differences and to extend the boundaries of their roles, and therefore stretch themselves and lift others. As we wrap up, I want to ask you what implications that sports mindset has on the culture of an organization. Particularly now, we hear Jamie Dimon CEO of JP Morgan, just in May 24th, Forbes article say that sports is no longer a metaphor. Modern CEOs need to think like top athletes. How does that sportsmanship mindset translate into modern leadership and the culture that you want, so that it no longer remains just that aspirational value that you have on your website, but is actually embedded into your company? Just your thoughts on the cultural aspect of sports.
Yeah, well, I think, and I take from what you say, like you talk about sportsmanship driven leadership, right? You talk about your language, you say stretch yourself, lift others, right? These are sort of the things that come. I completely believe in that. I think that even if you're a solo sportsman, you have a team of people behind you, and we're nothing without our teams. And I think the culture comes back to building community, sportsmanship behavior, and the need to have the team be successful. If you look at a person who assists in goals, they're as elevated and quite often winning the highest sportsmanship leadership, I would say, medallions and trophies more than even the person who scores the most, because the assists and the help and the defense and all of those sorts of things are what allows a team to be successful. And if your team is not feeling like your center, or your, whoever your captain is, if the captain is always at the front, then the captain doesn't know what's happening behind them, and then they're going to miss the shots, right? Your center is going to miss the shots. They're not going to know who to pass to because they don't have trust in that team, that culture, the inability to be able to, just pass it and be able to run up the court or whatever your sport is and know that that ball is going to end up to you so you can score the goal or shoot on the. Gretzky always says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And if you don't keep shooting, if you don't keep chopping away at it, if you don't keep getting the assists, if you don't keep getting past the puck, right, you're never going to be successful. And so I think that team will only be as successful as the captain, and the captain is only as successful as the team.
I'm glad that I was able to get to know you, Leela, as well as the audience here at All Out Coach. And I have a feeling that we have to continue this discussion. You're going to be guest again on the All Out Coach podcast, but I would love to leave the last words to you. What would you like our audience to leave with from this episode?
I would love to leave you with the concept of discipline and teamwork, the sports principles. These to me are the most important things. And I wanted to also thank you, Tim, for your leadership in this space. You've done so much to be able to share what leadership looks like. And I think that your metaphors that you use in sports in order to create the culture for the work that you've done is really, really inspiring. And for people like me who are new to this space, we feel very fortunate to meet folks like yourselves and be able to elevate these concepts. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you at the Medical Innovation Olympics.
Yay!
Yes. Right.